Welcome back to Gold Derby. I'm Christopher Rosen. I'm so pleased to be joined by Frankie Pine, the Emmy-nominated music supervisor for the Amazon series Daisy Jones and the Six. Frankie, let's start there. Congratulations on the Emmy nomination. What was it like when you found out? Like, had you kind of like go through that like process of finding out? I guess for you.
Oh, well, okay. So I knew that they were going to be announced on that Wednesday morning, and I just happened to be driving my kids to a dentist appointment. So I didn't get to listen or hear any of the nominations. So when I got my phone call from Miss Stephanie to say that I was nominated, I was almost like I cried. My kids were like, "What's the matter with you?" So it was so much fun, But God, what a just hearing that just kind of freaks me out. You know what I mean? It's such an incredible word to hear Emmy nominated.
Yeah, it's really great. It's got to be so exciting. I'm sure your kids were probably super psyched as well. Maybe in the end, right? I imagine. Who knows the kids, right? But yeah.
Me, you know.
So
And
yeah,
like,
well,
what
obviously,
is
like, yeah. So this show obviously, like, literally, probably could not exist without the music, and I guess like there's so many things I want to ask you about, but certainly like balancing, I guess, like for you to start, like balancing the original Aurora tracks that you're going to have obviously and that are in the show with actual or like real music from the era, I guess. And had you kind of go about figuring out like what songs would work, like what like songs from like actual artists from that era would work with the show, I guess, in itself, just broadly speaking.
Well, I think one of the things that we wanted to make sure is we wanted everyone to feel as if this band was of the same stature as the bands from that era. So, using bands like Boston and, those big kind of iconic Heart, Stevie Nicks, Fleetwood Mac, like using those kind of things. We wanted them to kind of feel like they were in the same, they were on the charts at the same time as all of those other artists. And I think that was one of our biggest goals, is that we didn't want it to feel like our band was kind of alone and not a part of the overall music scene from that time period.
The other thing you do really well, I think, is like using those bands, like you're saying, you're not picking like at least to me, it didn't seem like you're picking a lot of the songs that we've heard a million times, I guess. Like, how do you kind of like try to avoid picking like the very obvious songs, right? Or I guess like, even though I'm sure you could, like there are these classic songs that like everyone knows, but like maybe just doing one slight like evolution off of that, right? Or something like that. I guess like how much did you focus on that and try to like really make it feel authentic rather than just like a greatest hits, I guess.
We, when I talked with Scott and Will, I mean, for us, it was just finding those special gems. I don't think we weren't like active. The hits are always kind of like the easiest to find. Obviously, we know them. We can sing them off the top of our heads. So we wanted to kind of find like, maybe track 5 on the album. And just to kind of like, again, kind of keep us in the same world that Daisy Jones and the Six was a band from the 70s. And that was the, I guess the ruse that we wanted to send to our audience.
Right. Do you have like I guess for you, was there, I mean, when you're coming into this, do you come up with like a big playlist, or like how did you kind of like where do you start? Like I guess in this, not that you need like
I
yeah.
always start with playlists. Like I love making playlists, my favorite thing to do. So, I mean, even when we first started, even before like casting, like I would just make playlists like, hey, I did like all kinds of research on Billy. Billy's from the Midwest. What bands from this time period were, playing in the Midwest versus what California was playing. So I did all kinds of research in like, here's what Billy would be listening to. Here's what Daisy would have listened to, because she was a California girl as opposed to the Midwest. And I grew up in the Midwest, so to me, like the radio station to listen to was WMMS in Cleveland, and they played all of the classic rock from that time period. And So it was like kind of like really digging in and finding those artists that maybe didn't emerge completely throughout all of the US, but like just finding, songs and bands and artists, and each person, got a playlist. Each character got a playlist.
So what was on like what were some of the bands on the Billy playlist? Like, let's say.
Oh my, I mean, I'd have to look, but
Okay.
but it was really like obscure things. Like I would look like who's from Pittsburgh, what bands came from Pittsburgh, and I think like Todd Rundgren's from like the Midwest, and then there were like these really off like artists that, again, like I said, just never really got like the hits throughout the US, but like were big artists in the Midwest. And so it was really, I mean, that's to me is my favorite part about the job, is doing the research and really trying to find those special little ditties that make something unique.
Did you like then share, like, I love this. Did you share that kind of stuff with like Sam and stuff too? Like, I mean, the
Oh yeah.
playlist or no? Yeah.
Oh yeah, everybody got their own playlist. They, because they were doing their own research at the same time. So it was all kind of encompassing of like, like I mean, as a music supervisor, that's what was so, I think, incredible about working on this project, that, being in from the start, uh creating like, hey, this is what this character would have listened to. You don't really get that kind of in on a lot of projects, and I think that's what makes this project stand out so differently, is that I was really able to kind of like dig in to each one of their characters and the development of that character. So not only what's the actor kind of working on what their character development was, but I was a part of contributing to that. So that's kind of a big difference in just kind of like your standard music supervision gig.
Yeah, you've done, I mean, I think you've done stuff with Hello Sunshine before too, right? Like, so is
Yeah.
that like, do you think like, I mean, like when did, I guess, like how early, like were you like how early in this process were you brought in then, basically?
Oh, I was the first one
Yeah.
hired.
Okay.
So I was the first one hired, and then I, made my list of like who should be our executive music producers. Blake Mills, of course, was on that list. That's who we selected. We kind of got him going with the songwriting and just general concepts of, and he and Tony were helping with like the, like, hey, this really wouldn't have happened. And we were all a part of like the writing process. And then, putting together this incredible music team of people that, were there to kind of help create this band, giving the lessons. Ryan Hummel was, my music director, who taught guitar and bass and really kind of like ran all of the rehearsals. And we had drum coach, we had so many different people that kind of helped kind of shape and guide this this story and this character and this band to become who what you ultimately see on screen.
Right. And it's amazing too, because like, I mean, like obviously the album has been a huge success away from the show, right? As well, which has got to be really gratifying too, that it's like such a great, the music is so great as its own thing beyond the show, even, right? I think that is like a real testament to the show.
Like I remember when I first started, I was like, man, I want this band before they even show. This was my dream. I want this band to even come. I want them to do a show at the Troubadour, like they are a real band, and just kind of see like how people would react and how they would respond to, is this really, like, I wanted to suspend the reality of, is this really a band? I mean, I wanted to question it. Like, is this band really from the 70s? I can't believe I missed them from the 70s, Like, that's what I really wanted everyone to kind of feel and experience from watching the show.
And I think they do. It's a great, it just sounds so good. So
I mean, I still question it. It's like, well, of course they're real.
I want to ask you a couple of songs. What was it for the credits? It's the Patti Smith song, "Dancing Barefoot," and I just like, how did you kind of? It's so perfect for the credits, I feel like, and I love the way it kind of like folds, because the begins like in the way it kind of builds. But I guess like, was that always what you were thinking of for like? I don't want to call it like the theme of the show, like the theme song, but you know what I mean? Like it's the opening credit song, so it's very important. I guess like, where'd you come up with that one? Or I guess or
Well, it's main title, and we talked about like, we didn't want it to be, like a number one hit, because we didn't want, again, the comparison of like, our band, a real number one hit making band. And we went through a lot of different things. I remember specifically being on set. We were shooting at Sound City, and Scott and I were like hovered in this little like room where there was a bunch of like machinery from the all the electricians and stuff like that. And we're like in there on our computers, and we're listening to a bunch of different stuff on Spotify. And Scott looks over and he goes, "What do you think of this one?" I'm like, "Well, shit, I love Patti Smith." And and I was like, "Oh my God, it's kind of perfect because it's Daisy. She's always barefoot." I mean, and I love the fact that it also um is a song that is an older song. So it's almost as if like the evolution of, starting in the early 60s, kind of getting ourselves to that point in 1977 or 78 when we finished the show, minus the interview part, but like where the band kind of breaks up, that we wanted that song to kind of be that pinnacle ending song too, as well. And so really it was the mind of Scott Newstetter. I had nothing to do with it.
On this one, I want to ask you.
Joy.
At least you liked it, right? Like,
yeah, she was one of my favorite artists in the 70s. So
you mentioned Fleetwood Mac before, and obviously like the Taylor Jenkins Reid was like inspired by Fleetwood Mac. I was reading that she was like, she watched the dance concert film, and specifically like the performance of Silver Springs in that like kind of like sparked like a lot of the inspiration, I guess, for writing Daisy Jones. I was wondering, like, did you like, was that a song you like at least used partially for your own like, I don't know, inspiration or like kind of like thought process as well? Or like, how did you kind of approach, like, I know there is Gold Dust Woman in the show too, which I was going to ask you about, but just in general, I guess like Silver Springs, was that anything on your mind at all, or like at all, like from the Fleetwood Mac aspect of it?
Well, one of the things that we kind of talked about at the very beginning was, we really kind of thought the Fleetwood Mac music was kind of off the table. We didn't want, the comparison. So we really didn't want to use any Fleetwood Mac. And when we had that opening sequence where it's kind of like a very slow-mo, just kind of getting out of her, like drug stupor, the Gold Dust Woman just kind of was too perfect to pass up. But I think in general, we wanted to shy away from it, so that we wouldn't have that comparison, like this, oh, this is the Fleetwood Mac story or anything like that, because it isn't. It's loosely feels like it, but we wanted the characters also to kind of stand on their own.
Definitely. And you also get, by using it in the 9th episode, right? I think it's the 9th episode. It's like, you're already kind of like, you kind of like are established in the show, right? So it feels like you're not just like,
you're already drawn in. Yeah. And you're, it's funny because I never actually included anything, any Fleetwood Mac on any of my playlists. So that was definitely a find kind of in editorial, just kind of like, let's just play around and see, like, are we going to do this? Are we really going to do this kind of thing? And we bit the bullet and we did it.
Do you know, like we said, there's so much music on the show. I guess, was there like a particular, like, were there any like clearance challenges, or like what was something for you that was like really difficult, I guess, from that aspect of it? Or were there songs where you're like, wow, this is going to be really hard for us to get, or I'm hoping we get it, like that kind of thing?
I mean, the hardest scene was when Daisy and Nikki are in their major drug happy, jumping on the bed, having a blast, just drinking and drugs. And I was surprised at how many no's we got because of drugs. So like ELO said no. Then I started courting Led Zeppelin heavily for that scene. And, I specifically went, for songs that weren't their hits. I even went to the publisher. What do you think they would say yes to? And they still said no. And when we finally got down to, really kind of playing around with I was calling publishers. Who's not going to say no? It was my question. Who's not going to say no? But we took a risk and we put in the jam, and they said yes, and it worked so great in that scene. I love it so much, and I'm so happy that that's the one we ended up with.
Yeah, that's great. What is it? It's necessity is the mother of invention, right?
No, in the city.
Yeah. Do you have like, you mentioned before, like how also like putting together like the album and stuff, I guess just brought like for you, do you have like a like picking a favorite maybe is hard, but like what is your like what song on the Aurora album are you like most do you most enjoy, I guess, or what is like a favorite?
Toss up between Look at Us Now and The River. Like those are my like I love The River because of what it does to my body. It makes me want to move. And just feel so 70s Fleetwood Mac-ish. But Look at Us Now to me is the story. And like it's so perfect to the story that like it's kind of like when you see like social media posts and stuff like that, and the Emmy nominations, it's like, oh, look at us now. I mean, it just kind of does so much more than just be the song from the show. So it's hard to pick between those two.
Those are also probably my favorites. I think Look at Us Now is so great though in the way it's used in the show, and I think that's the third episode, right, when they record it, and it just is like the whole thing levels up, I feel like, at that moment, and you get like, it's like, oh wow, this really locks in. I guess for you, when you first saw that in the performances of like Riley and Sam, like were you just like, man, this show is gonna work, or did you like, when did you know the show is actually gonna work, I guess, like?
So we had our first on camera moment with the band. We were in New Orleans, and we had done, other stuff, obviously on camera stuff in LA, just as the Dunn brothers and such. And I think when they did their first song performance, I just said, oh my God, the band camp worked. Because we really like worked hard in band camp to not only teach them how to play this stuff. And my goal during band camp, and I think all the coaches' goals, was to make sure that they weren't looking at their hands. I wanted them to know the music so inside and out that it was more about the camaraderie of the band than it was about looking at your hands and am I playing the right thing. So we really drilled hard on teaching them, like, they know how to play all of that music. And I wanted them to have that freedom of not worrying about what they were playing, so that they could emote and look at each other and do the acting part seamlessly with the movement of their hands. and I have, like, that to me is probably like the most special thing about this, is that they worked hard. I've never seen such a cast work so hard. And in particular Sam, who was like, unfortunately, like the last one cast, and didn't know how to play guitar, and never sang before, and it really kind of came in at the last minute and kept thinking, oh my God, there's no way in hell I'm going to be able to do this. I mean, the poor guy had to lose weight, he had to look like he was on drugs, he had to get rid of his British accent, play guitar and sing and act. So, my goal was to just make it as seamless as possible. And, I really hope that all of these actors keep up on their music lessons.
Me too. So much because, like you were saying, I'd love to see them do a show. Like,
Oh my God, yes,
great.
I want that so badly.
Do you have like just broadly before we go? I guess like you've been like you're incredibly your resume is incredible. You've done so many great shows and projects as music supervisor. I guess like what do you like even like now? Like what do you still love about this? And like it sounds like I'm sure there's a million things, but like what do you love about doing this and like this craft? I think is like so great. So like yeah, like what do you love about it?
I mean, for me, I hate to say this, but I am a sap. So when I hear a piece of music that affects me emotionally, like to me, then I know, like I've already got goosebumps just talking about it right now. Like I get super affected by music. And I mean, back in the day before I even started doing anything like this, all I ever said was, I just do something to promote music, and getting that feeling like when something really works is just incredibly satisfying. And and especially when it makes me cry.
I'm like, so I'm the biggest sucker too. Sap watching these anything like when if it's perfect song and the image, I'm like waterworks always. So like totally understand that.
Right at the end, Scott had said to me, at the end of 110, I need a song that's going to make me cry. And I was just like, all right, was on a mission. And I kind of had carte blanche because it wasn't time specific. He was like, it could be anything. And I was like, well, how can we have this show without having the Rolling Stones? And we didn't have any Rolling Stones because it was the final episode. Everything else was already picked. And so I just dove into catalogs that we hadn't used. And yeah, just finding that song, and it just gives me goosebumps when it hits like right on her smile. Forget about it.
It's so good. It really is really fantastic ending. Yeah, it's really great. Frankie Pine, we have to wrap up here, but an Emmy nominee this year for Daisy Jones and the Six. You watch all the episodes on Amazon. Absolutely should. It's a great show, and the soundtrack is all the music is amazing. Frankie, thank you so much, and congratulations on your Emmy nomination.
Thank you so much.